Welcome to our deep dive today. Our listeners have been asking for a deep dive into a fascinating historical account, a nun's ghostly return, and it draws directly from an unpublished manuscript on purgatory. It's a case that really gets into our Catholic beliefs about purgatory, and I'm really interested to unpack it with you today.
It is a unique story, that's for sure. We're talking about Sister MDLC,
Right.
a nun in 19th century France who claimed to have been visited by the ghost of another nun, Sister MG, who was suffering in purgatory.
Yes, and what's so interesting is it's not just, a story that's passed around. We have Sister MDLC's written records.
Yes.
Detailed accounts of these encounters.
Yes.
And what's even more incredible is that they were approved and encouraged by her spiritual director, Father Prevel.
That's a key detail.
Yes.
Because it really adds this layer of scrutiny and legitimacy to the account.
Right.
Having the church involved from the get-go makes this a particularly compelling case, certainly within Catholic circles.
Absolutely. So let's start with Sister MDLC. Was she, someone who was prone to flights of fancy? A bit of a drama queen?
No, not at all. In fact, those who knew her, her peers and students, described her as a saint, a woman known for her sound judgment,
Okay.
and her aversion to sensationalism. It really seems very unlikely that someone with this reputation would just fabricate such an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, and the manuscript even mentions that she didn't go looking for these encounters with Sister MG, but rather she kind of felt obligated to act as this intermediary, right? This go-between.
Right.
That reluctance actually, I think, adds to her credibility, don't you think?
I agree. Yeah. So let's kind of get into how this visitation began. In November 1873, Sister MDLC started hearing these disembodied sighs that seemed to follow her around.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine how unsettling that would be.
Yeah.
And then on February 15th, 1874, the voice actually identified itself as Sister MG, who had died about 3 years earlier on February 22, 1871.
Wow. Chills. Right. So Sister MG revealed that she was trapped in purgatory, that she was suffering intensely, and she was pleading for Sister MDLC's help. And what I think is really interesting, too, is that their relationship while they were alive was somewhat strained, which makes this plea even more, poignant, I guess.
Absolutely. And it really does speak to the profound nature of purgatory, that even those with unresolved conflicts in life are united in their longing for God and their need for the prayers of the living.
It really is. It's a beautiful point. And it's also worth highlighting, that throughout this whole ordeal, Sister MDLC kept her superiors and her spiritual director fully informed. In fact, Father Prevel actually encouraged her to document everything. So that demonstrates the church's awareness of this entire case. And this involvement, I think, adds another layer of credibility, wouldn't you say?
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, before we go too much further, I think it's a good time to take a step back and make sure we understand what purgatory is within the Catholic teaching.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it is a fundamental doctrine, but I'm sure that some of our listeners, they could probably use a quick refresher.
Right. So the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 1030 to 1032, describes purgatory as a state of purification for those who die in God's grace, but still need cleansing before they can enter heaven. It's a place of temporary suffering that is meant to prepare the soul for perfect union with God.
So Sister MDLC's account, aligns, I think, perfectly with this doctrine. Wouldn't you say it serves as this sort of experiential testament to the suffering that souls endure in purgatory and their reliance on the prayers of the living?
Yes, I would agree. And it's this powerful reminder that our actions here on earth have a direct impact on the souls in purgatory. And it really underscores the interconnectedness of the church militant, the church suffering, and the church triumphant.
Absolutely. Now, what I find so interesting is the content of Sister MG's messages. What did she actually reveal from beyond the grave?
That's a great question. So, as recorded in an unpublished manuscript on purgatory, these messages from Sister MG highlighted several really profound themes, each offering, I think, valuable lessons for us as Catholics.
Let's dive into those.
Okay. First and foremost, she really emphasized the intense suffering that's experienced in purgatory, primarily the separation from God.
Right. And that's, it's hard to even imagine that anguish, right?
Yeah.
To be so close to God but unable to reach him. It's a potent reminder for us to really prioritize our relationship with God while we have the opportunity.
Absolutely. And another key theme was the importance of prayer and sacrifice.
Okay.
offered by the living to actually aid those in purgatory. She repeatedly stressed that our actions here on earth can lessen their suffering and help them reach heaven sooner.
That's a huge responsibility that we have as Catholics, right? And in fact, she gave some very specific advice on what we could do to help the souls in purgatory, didn't she?
She did. She highlighted, simple things like making intentions, praying the way of the cross, and invoking the intercession of specific saints.
So it's almost like she's providing this roadmap for how we can effectively, help the souls in purgatory.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, her messages are really like the spiritual guide, not just for Sister MDLC, but for all of us who want to kind of extend God's mercy to those who have gone before us. And it's important to note that her messages weren't just focused on, the suffering of purgatory.
Right, right. There's a lot of hope woven into her words too, especially when she talked about the soul's eventual, being released into heaven.
Exactly. And she doesn't just describe the suffering. She provides a lot of guidance to Sister MDLC and by extension to us on how to live a life that leads to heaven.
Right. It's like she's giving us this glimpse, right,
Yeah.
behind the veil and showing us what really matters in the eyes of God.
Absolutely. And one of the most prominent themes that emerges in her messages is this idea of living a hidden life, a life of humility and interior devotion.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember her saying things like, God wants you to be holier than many others, and you must become indifferent to everything except what is for God.
Hmm.
Those words really, really stuck with me.
It speaks to the heart of our Catholic faith, doesn't it? True holiness isn't about outward appearances or worldly success. It's about cultivating a deep, intimate relationship with God.
Yeah. And that inward focus should extend to how we approach prayer and the sacraments, right?
Absolutely. Preparing well for Holy Communion, mortifying the senses, and treating God as our father, friend, and spouse. It's not just about going through the motions. It's about engaging our whole being in our relationship with God.
Hmm. And she also provided some guidance on navigating the complexities of life, particularly for those in religious life, didn't she?
She did. She cautioned against excessive conversation, especially with those who are, too demonstrative and talkative.
Mhm.
And she reminds Sister MDLC that, God desires this more contemplative and interior disposition. And this advice, while directed at a nun, I think it holds wisdom for all of us, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think it's a reminder to be mindful of, the company that we keep
Hmm.
and to really prioritize silence and solitude for spiritual growth.
Now, beyond, that practical advice, she also offers some pretty profound theological insights. For instance, she talks about this hierarchy of suffering and purgatory, a
Mhm.
concept that might be a little difficult to grasp at first.
Right. Yeah, I remember her saying, the purgatory of religious is much longer and more rigorous than that of people in the world
Yeah.
because religious abuse special graces. It's a sobering thought.
It is. It suggests that those who are entrusted with, more responsibility and grace will be held to a higher standard. And it raises the question of how we're using the gifts that God has given us, right?
It's a challenge, I think, to all of us to really live up to our potential and to use our talents for God's glory.
Precisely. She also describes these different stages of purgatory. She calls them great or worst, second, and a third stage, which is the purgatory of desire.
Okay.
And this offers a glimpse into the soul's journey toward purification, a journey with these varying levels of intensity, leading ultimately to union with God.
It's really hard to wrap your mind around.
It is.
But it makes you think, it makes you contemplate the vastness of God's mercy and the different, paths that souls take toward him.
It does. And then there's this question of time in purgatory. And, she mentioned souls remaining there for, 30 to 40 years, some for longer periods, others for shorter. But then she qualifies that by saying, here it is, quite different.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, right? That time is different. And it reminds us that our earthly understanding of time doesn't necessarily apply to the afterlife. It raises all these questions about eternity and the nature of existence outside of our linear perception of time.
It certainly does. And she also provided some insight into how souls in purgatory can perceive our prayers and our thoughts. She said thoughts of earth can be made known here, but she clarifies that the souls in purgatory know those persons who interest themselves in their behalf on earth.
That's both comforting and motivating.
Right.
It means that our prayers actually have a tangible impact.
Yeah.
And that the souls actually recognize those who pray for them. This really strengthens this whole idea of the communion of saints, right? That we're all connected, the living and the departed.
Precisely. And speaking of the saints, she offered some compelling insights into St. Michael the Archangel's role in the afterlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I remember her, talking about how St. Michael comes to get the souls that have finished their purification and leads them to heaven. And it's such a powerful image of his role as this protector and guide for souls.
She also mentioned how he, visits purgatory on his feast day.
Right.
And returns to heaven with a great number of souls, especially with those who had been devout to him in life.
That's encouraging for those with a devotion to St. Michael, to think that our faithfulness here might actually translate to his assistance in the afterlife. It's a comforting thought.
Now, while Sister MG does offer all these valuable insights into these mysteries, she also acknowledges the limitations of human understanding. She says, my knowledge is very limited, and all that happens in this other world is a mystery for yours.
Right. It's a good reminder for us to approach these topics with humility and open mind.
Yeah.
Acknowledging that we may not, have all the answers.
Yeah. Exactly. And despite these limitations, she courageously addresses some challenging questions like the salvation of non-Catholics. Regarding Protestants, she said, by the mercy of God, a certain number of Protestants are saved, but their purgatory is for many long and rigorous.
That's a nuanced answer, right?
Yeah.
It acknowledges God's mercy while also highlighting the fullness of truth found within the Catholic Church.
It does, and it really underscores the importance of seeking truth and living in accordance with it, while also recognizing that God's ways are ultimately beyond our comprehension.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it, to uphold the teachings of the Church while also remaining open to the mystery of God's mercy.
It is, and she also delved into, a really sensitive topic, sudden deaths, and explains how they can be both acts of God's justice and mercy.
Yeah, I found that part really, really thought-provoking. She said, such deaths are sometimes an act of justice, sometimes one of mercy. When a soul is timid, and God knows it is well prepared to appear before him, he takes it out of this world suddenly to spare it the terrors it might experience at the last moment.
That's a perspective that can be really comforting to those who have lost loved ones suddenly,
Yeah.
It reminds us that even in those seemingly tragic circumstances, God's love and care are at work.
Yeah. It reinforces this idea that we shouldn't presume to know God's reasons,
Right.
but instead we should just trust in his ultimate plan.
Right. And she also acknowledged that sudden deaths can be acts of God's justice, particularly for those who have, persisted in grave sin without repenting. It's a reminder that while God is merciful, we shouldn't take his mercy for granted.
Right. It highlights the need to live each day with intention, striving to make amends for our sins and draw closer to God.
And one of the most vivid descriptions she provides is of the soul's experience after death. She talks about, the devil's final assault on the dying soul, but also how God permits souls to go through these last trials to increase their merits.
Wow. Yeah. It's a reminder that the spiritual battle doesn't end with our earthly life. It continues, right up until our final breath. But even more importantly, I think it emphasizes that God uses even these final trials for our good, to strengthen our souls.
And she describes this encounter with St. Michael at death. And she says, St. Michael is present when the soul leaves the body. I saw him only, and he is the only one that every soul sees.
It's a comforting image, isn't it? To know that even in that moment of transition, we're not alone. St. Michael, the defender of souls, stands by our side.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of the communion of saints and the unwavering support that we receive from those in heaven.
Now, she also talks about how the sentence of purgatory is pronounced and how the soul, which is the real culprit, for the body only obeys the soul, suffers as if the body were suffering. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it speaks to this profound connection between our soul and body even after death. It suggests that the soul, having led the body in both good and bad actions, bears the responsibility for those actions in purgatory. It makes you reflect on the choices we make and the impact they have on our souls, both in this life and the next.
It really does. And her description of the soul's immediate experience after death is just incredible. She said, when the soul leaves the body, it is as if it were lost in or if I may say so, surrounded by God.
Yeah.
It finds itself in such a bewildering light that in the twinkling of an eye, it sees all the actions of its life, the good and the evil.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
almost like this divine replay, a moment of reckoning where the soul confronts the entirety of its earthly existence. It's a powerful call to live with integrity, knowing that every choice matters.
hmm And she doesn't shy away from the awe-inspiring, I guess, experience of judgment. She describes how the soul, sees God face to face for a moment, and that no human tongue can describe the beauty and majesty of the sovereign judge.
It's a humbling thought, isn't it, to stand before God and be judged for all that we have done. It really underscores the importance of living each day with a sense of accountability, striving to align our will with His.
Absolutely. And amidst all these, descriptions of judgment and purification,
Hmm.
she also offers this glimpse of the souls who go straight to heaven. She says, for that soul, its union with Jesus continues after death. That is heaven, but the union in heaven is far more perfect than on earth.
It's a beautiful reminder of the ultimate goal of our Catholic faith, right? To be united with God in perfect love and joy for all eternity. It gives us hope that our efforts here on earth, however imperfect, are not in vain. We're working towards something truly glorious and everlasting.
We are. And throughout these messages, Sister MG doesn't just focus on the afterlife. She also offers just this wealth of advice on how to live a holy life here on earth.
And that's what makes this account so valuable. It's not just this theoretical exploration purgatory. It's a guide for living a life that pleases God.
Right. And some of her advice is quite challenging. Like when she repeatedly tells Sister MDLC to die to yourself and to have no longer any will of your own nor love of self, it seems almost impossible in our self-centered world.
It is. It's a radical call to self-denial, but it's really at the heart of Christian discipleship. It's about surrendering our will to God's will, allowing Him to work in and through us. It's about, prioritizing love for God above all else.
Yeah. And she also stresses this importance of purity of intention. She says, it is only love that will be rewarded in heaven. All that is done for any other motive will count as nothing. It's a sobering reminder that our motivations actually matter. We need to examine our hearts and make sure that our actions are truly rooted in love for God and not in self-seeking.
Exactly. And she speaks about the importance of humility, reminding Sister MDLC that Jesus does not always give His graces to the most holy. It's a reminder that God's grace is a gift, not something we earn. We need to approach Him with humility, recognizing our own neediness and dependence on His mercy. It's not about striving for perfection in our own strength. It's about surrendering to His transforming grace.
Right. And amidst all this advice, she makes this rather startling observation, I think, about the world. What great blindness there is in the world about all this, she said. What do you think she meant by that?
It's a poignant observation, isn't it? It suggests that many people are living in spiritual darkness, unaware of the realities of the afterlife and the urgency of seeking God's will. It's a call for us as Catholics to be lights in the world, to share the truth of our faith, and to invite others to embrace the path of holiness.
It's a reminder that we're not just called to, save ourselves. We're called to be missionaries of God's mercy and love.
And amidst the challenges and the warnings, Sister MG also offers words of encouragement and hope.
Oh, right, yeah. Like when she said, He is the master and distributes His graces to whomsoever He pleases. You are one of the souls whom He has especially favored.
Yeah. It's a reminder that God's grace is sufficient for us, even in our weakness.
Yeah.
He chooses us, He loves us, and He equips us for the task at hand.
It's comforting to know that, even when we stumble and fall, God's grace is always there to pick us up and set us back on the right path.
She also encourages a spirit of trust and surrender, saying, "It is not right of you to be thus distrustful of your Jesus. You have given Him all. Be quite convinced that He has permitted all that has happened." It's a call to let go of our anxieties and fears and to place our trust in God's providential care.
It's a reminder that even when we don't understand, what's happening in our lives, God has a plan. He's working all things together for our good, even if we can't see it at the time.
Right. And she reminds us that even in the midst of suffering, there is always hope. Despite your many occupations, she said, He must be first in your thoughts. Whenever you have to speak to people on business, you should first glance toward Him. He has a right to this. He is the master and may act as He pleases.
It's a beautiful reminder that God is always with us, even in the most ordinary moments of life. He's not just this distant deity. He's a loving father who wants to be involved in every aspect of our lives.
And one thing that really struck me was her advice on how to make spiritual progress. Begin each day as if you had as yet done nothing, she said, but take care that you do not discourage yourself. It's a call to start each day fresh with a renewed commitment to seeking God's will. And it's also a reminder to be patient with ourselves in our spiritual journey.
Right.
Growth takes time and setbacks are inevitable, but with God's grace, we can keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Exactly. And she also emphasized the importance of relying on God's grace rather than our own strength. The more you detach yourself from earthly things, she said, the more will Jesus shower his choicest graces and divine caresses upon you.
It's a reminder that God's love is always pursuing us, drawing us closer to himself. And the more we surrender to him, the more we experience his transforming power.
And as we continue to explore these profound mysteries, it's important to remember that we're not alone in our search for understanding. We have the guidance of the church, the wisdom of the saints, and the prayers of the souls in purgatory.
And we also have each other. By sharing our insights, our questions, our experiences, we can help each other to grow in faith and to draw closer to God.
And one thing that I find particularly inspiring is Sister MG's unwavering confidence in God's mercy. Despite her own suffering, she never loses sight of the fact that God is good and that he desires our salvation.
Yeah. It's like when she said, "Oh, how great is the mercy of God in your regard. Who can understand it? Why does Jesus act thus towards you? Why does he love you more than many others? Why has he still many greater graces to bestow on you? Is it because you deserve them? No, you even deserve them less than many others. But it is his will to act thus towards you, and he is the master of his rewards. Be very grateful. Remain always in spirit at his divine feet, and let him act as he will."
It's a powerful reminder that God's love is a gift, not something we earn. And it's a call to respond with gratitude and humility, allowing him to work in our lives according to his perfect plan.
It really is. And she also encourages us to trust in God's timing. She says, "Do not breathe or live except for Jesus Christ."
It's a reminder that God's ways are not our ways. He has a plan for each of us, and we need to be patient and trusting, even when we don't understand his ways.
It's a challenge to let go of our own plans and agendas and to surrender to God's will, but ultimately it's the path to true peace and fulfillment.
And what I find particularly comforting is her assurance that God never abandons us, even in our darkest moments.
Yes, that's right. She says, "What can he not do for a soul he loves?"
It's a beautiful reminder that God's love is steadfast and unwavering. He's always with us, guiding us, protecting us, and leading us toward our ultimate destination, heaven.
He is. And as we delve deeper into Sister MG's insights, it becomes clear that she's not just concerned with the afterlife. She also offers this really valuable guidance on how to live a holy life here on earth.
That's right. She says things like, you must watch carefully over everything you do. Ask yourself each hour if God be pleased with you, because you are to become a saint quickly.
It's a call to constant self-examination, to live with intention, and to always seek to align our actions with God's will.
Exactly. And she also encourages a spirit of detachment from earthly things, saying things like, die to yourself from morning to night. Do not breathe or live except for Jesus Christ.
These are challenging words, but they point to the heart of Christian discipleship.
Yeah.
To die to ourselves so that Christ can live in us.
And she also emphasizes the importance of purity of intention, saying, it is only love that will be rewarded in heaven. All that is done for any other motive will count as nothing.
Right. It's a sobering reminder that our motivations matter.
They do. And she also speaks about the importance of humility, reminding Sister MDLC that Jesus does not always give his graces to the most holy.
It's a good reminder that God's grace is a gift.
It is. And she encourages us to approach him with humility, recognizing our own neediness and dependence on his mercy.
Right. And what I find particularly striking is her description of the spiritual blindness that exists in the world. What great blindness there is in the world about all this, she said.
It's a reminder that many people are living in darkness, unaware of the realities of the afterlife, and the urgency of seeking God's will.
Yeah, it's a call to be lights in the world, to share the truth of our faith, and to invite others to embrace the path of holiness.
And one thing that I find particularly encouraging is Sister MG's assurance that God has a plan for each of us, even if we don't understand it.
Right, like when she said, leave it entirely in the hands of God and go steadily forward.
Yeah, it's a call to trust in God's providence, even when things are difficult or confusing.
Absolutely.
He knows what he's doing, and he'll lead us to where we need to be.
And she also reminds us that God's grace is always available to us, even when we feel unworthy.
Right. She says, the more you detach yourself from earthly things, the more will Jesus shower his choicest graces and divine caresses upon you.
It's a reminder that God's love is always pursuing us, drawing us closer to himself. And the more we surrender to him, the more we experience his transforming power.
And, as we continue to explore these profound mysteries, it's important to remember that we're not just dealing with intellectual concepts.
Right, right. These truths have a real and practical impact on our lives.
They do, yeah.
They shape our relationships, our choices, and our ultimate destiny.
Sister MG's messages are filled with practical advice on how to live a holy life, how to navigate relationships, how to approach suffering, and how to prepare for death.
It's true. Her words are like this spiritual roadmap guiding us toward a deeper understanding of God's love and how to live in accordance with his will.
Yeah, it's really amazing how her messages weave together, these profound theological truths with this really practical advice for daily living. It's a potent reminder that our faith, it isn't meant to be lived out in isolation, but rather it's meant to be woven into every aspect of our lives. Absolutely. It's not just about understanding these concepts. It's about allowing them to transform us, from the inside out.
And, as we wrap up our deep dive, I think it's worth revisiting the context of this story. Remember, this all took place in 19th century France, a period that was marked by revolutions, wars, and a really shifting societal landscape.
Yeah, it is significant that amidst such upheaval, this account of faith and the afterlife emerged. It serves as a powerful reminder that even when the world around us feels chaotic, God is still in control.
It's a real source of comfort for us as Catholics, knowing that our faith transcends the temporal and offers this firm foundation in times of uncertainty. We're not just, adrift in a sea of changing ideologies. We have an anchor in the eternal truths of our faith.
Precisely. And the Church's response to Sister MDLC's experiences is also worth noting. The fact that she kept her superiors and her spiritual director informed, and that Father Prevel encouraged her to document everything really speaks volumes.
Yeah, it shows, an openness to investigating these kinds of claims while also maintaining a healthy dose of skepticism. The Church doesn't just blindly accept, every supernatural account, but it also doesn't dismiss them outright.
That's a key point. It highlights the Church's role as this discerning guide, helping us to navigate the complexities of faith and reason, the natural and the supernatural.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I'd like to turn to you, our listener.
Yeah.
What stands out to you most from this account? What resonates with your own experiences and beliefs as a Catholic?
It's a question worth pondering. The story of Sister MDLC and Sister MG offers a wealth of insights into purgatory, the afterlife, and the call to holiness. It challenges us to examine our own lives and to consider how we can, better live out our faith in a world that often seems to have forgotten God.
And remember, we're not just passive observers in this great drama of salvation. We're called to be active participants, to cooperate with God's grace and to strive for holiness in everything we do.
Let this deep dive inspire you to, deepen your prayer life, to practice acts of charity and self-denial, and to seek God's will in all things. May it serve as this reminder that this earthly life is but a preparation for the eternal life that awaits us.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of our Catholic faith. May God bless you abundantly and guide you on your path to holiness.